Yes.
There it is.
All right. Welcome. I guess this is our first leadership board meeting in a long time. We kind of got elected, and then we got sucked into the chai paper. So, it brings us to the other side of the paper, a new world order, and I guess some pressing decisions or conversations that kind of rest on our shoulders. I guess first and foremost is the leadership board. You know, what's our scope? What is our function? What is our role, if any? Demo. Um, I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. I know I've talked to some of you individually, and I think there's some thoughts. I don't know if anybody wants to hop in now. I have my opinion on what I think we should do. I can kick off with that if you'd like, or I can share it for later.
You state your opinion?
I could.
But
yeah, I think. Look, I think we have evolved this platform to. I think we made a lot more progress than anyone could ever have imagined under the circumstances. We've generated 2 academic papers. Yet, all that being said, I still don't know what our purpose is. And for me, that's really the cornerstone, that if we can arrive at a mission statement, maybe even some project plans, or really put concretely into what we are looking to do, that will help, I think, galvanize and put future conversations into perspective. And so what is our mission? We had, at the very beginning, our first couple milestones were galvanized by the trust power conversation. And they still hold, those ring true for me. But since then, we've had a lot of experience and a lot of experiences that have kind of tempered that a little bit. Because it seems like commercial enterprises don't really need trust and power to function. So my question is, where can we have the most impact? And my answer is, we shouldn't be looking to companies. We should be looking to, like, ILO, World Bank, United Nations. I think we have the opportunity to help stabilize economies. I think we could provide the greatest impact to those in need. That's where my vision of this has matured and kind of evolved to, and that's where I see our mission. So I've kind of gone a little far afield. It's a little beyond the scope of what the leadership board is, or should be. But from my material perspective, what we do is shaped by what we as a platform want to do. So I'd like to hand the baton over to someone who has similar or some competing opinions. Durham, you want to chime in?
Maybe later.
So in many ways I agree with you. Let me play my own devil's advocate. Calling back to Anand's interview earlier, like a month ago or whatever, he was, if I boil down his advice to a sentence, it was basically, you can talk all you want, but ultimately it's the requesters who drive these markets, at least from his perspective. And so I wonder how, and while I really like the vision, what part of that vision is a vision for requesters? Because I think we need to know what that is. Otherwise, there's a bunch of people who we're going to help with no way to help them.
Yeah, and I think this is where we were talking a little bit about fair trade practices and some of those companies or those organizations that are looking to help. And so if we end up being this conduit, so let's spitball a little bit. Greece is going down the tubes right now, or it already has. And so, how, as part of the disaster recovery or even disaster prevention, they talk to DAMO, and we are in a position where we can help all these unemployed people acquire jobs or acquire tasks where money can flow into the pockets of people that need it. Well, who's going to generate those jobs? Well, those are going to be companies that realize that stability and that providing work to these folks is good from a holistic perspective. It's great PR and the like. So it's almost like when you become a conduit that you start appealing to the Microsofts of the world, not just that we can get their work done for them, but we can get it done in such a way that it has bigger meaning. That's just a rough-hewn way in which we could start appealing to requesters. But I think if we really think that through, that if we look at fair trade practices, we look at a universal minimum wage, we look at some of the social impact, you can almost create a market that we could fulfill.
So
at least I think.
I continue to agree with you, but I think we're sideswiping, or we're not addressing Anand's critique, which is that in many ways we don't have to be as good as how Microsoft does get stuff done right now. Right. We actually have to be way better somehow, because we are a risky proposition for them. Like, they don't know, they can't trust us, they've never seen us do work before. They've never worked with our APIs. So, and while I love it, I want to. If I'm gonna succeed, I think the first people we're gonna have to convince are the requesters, the Microsofts or whatever, and simply saying that it's good people, for a good cause, is not going to overcome sort of the risk aversion for them, in my opinion.
Correct.
It's going to be like and I feel good, but it's not I do it because I feel good. Does that make sense?
Right.
So I want to understand what we can do, because like Microsoft as an example, just thinking through it, they, anyone who's an expert, they tend to hire sort of onto salary. Others, they do subcontract, like their crowd work happens through ClickWorker. We can just be like, stop using ClickWorker, start using DAMO. Make the world better. But they know how to use ClickWorker, and they've engineered a bunch of stuff around it. So there's got to be something that we can provide that's the benefit to them.
I mean, if we can do ClickWorker plus, or at least achieve a certain level of quality there. Yeah, I don't know. That's going to require a more intensive conversation, because yeah, you're right. I mean, it is kind of a stonewall, because at the end of the day, our product needs to be, this is not just goodwill and charity we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There's good quality work that needs to emerge out of all this.
Well, and think of it sort of like the Prius. Like, it's okay, maybe it's a little more expensive, but it does save you gas money. Like there's a benefit that you can convince yourself exists in addition to saving the world, right?
Yeah, I mean, I am in agreement with both of you guys, and probably everybody, that, I mean, ultimately, we do have to build a better mousetrap regardless. I mean, I think obviously it's just, the research that we've done and the materials that we've produced to date have been not specifically towards that end. We have been focusing on trust and power, and there's been a lot of engineering done. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in this area to do some more research and come up with, from a functional perspective of the platform itself, how can we be better? I mean, my concerns for the leadership board at this time are more operational as far as the actual project goes. My areas of attention are we've had a lot of attrition, and I think some of it's natural, and some of it there's some learning opportunities for us going forward. I mean, I think we need to look at what we're going to do about recruitment going forward. I think it's worth spending some time looking at the tools we have and some of the barriers that we have from just an operational perspective as far as accessing data, or if somebody comes back and has been away for a while, there isn't a really easy way for them to catch up. I think we have some communication stuff we have to clean up in that regard. So for me, my areas of attention and concern are more there. I have all the confidence in the folks that are participating that these research questions that we have, we can answer. I just think we need a better, stronger foundation underneath it so that the work that gets done can be productive. I personally feel like a lot of times folks will, and there's a number of different things, but there's a lot of time and effort that gets put in and kind of gets lost or gets wasted, and I think that contributes to the attrition problem. So while I am with everyone on the big picture concerns, I feel like for me it's more the foundation underneath it that needs a little attention at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to say just that we are talking about mission and not exactly what the leadership board does. We can think of a leadership board within the frames of this mission, but yeah, I agree with Allison. What I think about the leadership board is that we gotta have some sort of autonomy to solve conflicts. That's very likely what we are here for.
Are we talking, Carolina? Are you talking right now between, the folks on researcher to researcher, or to workers and requesters, or all the above?
All the above. All the above. I think we could think of a model that can evolve in the future for less interference from leadership board, but I think right now someone has to be responsible for organizing.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, we've never had an official project plan on different, sub-projects.
We, if we're talking sort of operationally or pragmatically, I think there's a pretty strong sense of where we want to go and what can get us there. As we talked about over the weekend, I think our immediate goal is to sort of clean up some rough edges and use that to spawn, an actual soft launch such that we can start growing. I mean, I think some of these things, it's great to have a strategy, but some of them we'll have to figure out as by trying and iterating. My sense from talking to people so far in terms of recruitment is that it doesn't necessarily make sense to bring on new people until we have sort of at least crossed that threshold to a soft launch, just because we have so much sort of built up knowledge and so on right now. And that's why I haven't really brought it up. It's I think you're right that there is natural attrition, and there are problems. I have to think more about whether I think there's an attrition problem or if just attrition is what attrition is. Like, our attrition is way better than MOOCs, for example. Is it good? Is it bad? I actually don't know because no one else has done this. Certainly we can do better, and I think everything you articulated, I would love to improve. So for me, my interpretation at some level is that we've been pouring in effort and effort and effort and effort. And unless we can actually sort of allow people to start to see the returns on their effort, I worry that we're going to continue to we'll start demotivating people. So my hope is to sort of get to the point where you can see people are using this platform. You're changing people's lives as like an immediate next step. And I don't think we're that far off from that. And then be able to start recruiting new folks. Because then it's like, man, we already have this thing. People are using it. Come, do research on it, make it better, help us change the world.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that. I'm not. I'm trying to see how that. So you're talking about bringing folks on doing research. So, how does that translate, Michael? Where is? Are you looking then at a specific set of requesters to kind of prime the pump, so to speak? Do you have some requesters in mind to be like this first wave of users?
I have some in mind. I can't guarantee anything. I think we're all gonna have to. I think we're all gonna have to put in some effort massaging people to try and come up with, work to put on the platform. As as Anand told us, that was the hardest thing. So I think we have to not delude ourselves into thinking that it'll be easy. I have a number of researchers who want to put stuff there, but they tend to need large N studies rather than large. It's like sort of large horizontally rather than large vertically, like lots of people doing a small amount of work rather than a large amount of work. But I think it will only take a few like big wins to like put a ton of work into the system to start attracting workers, and if the workers start really liking it and the high quality work is coming out, then we can use that to recruit new people. Like it becomes a positive loop.
Yeah. And then what's the end game though? What's the goal of all of this?
Has it shifted?
I don't know. I mean, what is the end game? I think is it a nonprofit? We're talking about changing the world.
Yeah.
And so how does that play out? Is that merely aligning workers and work? What exactly does that mean? Because to me, changing the world, that's a calling card. I think if we structure an argument and a marketing campaign or a philosophy behind that, I think that's going to appeal to people as much as getting work done. For me, I see this as new opportunity. It is a new way of doing work, and I think if we have an opportunity to define ourselves uniquely in a way that no one else has, and I think that's one of our opportunities. That it'll give us scope, it'll give us purchase, it'll give us some appeal. Because who else is in the space? What are they doing? They're all taking these commercial approaches. Whereas, and that's fine and good, but will the consistency and the composition of our crowd allow us to do that?
To do what specifically?
To be when was it Adnan when he was talking about Genius Works, about how he, his process of iteration went from big generic crowd to a very focused, very specific client base and a very specific and a very dedicated crowd.
I think this is right. So now you're venturing into the world of my opinion rather than anything I have empirical facts to back up.
Yeah.
My opinion is that no matter what we do, we need to start small and focused. Facebook succeeded because it targeted, undergraduates at Harvard, right? Friendster succeeded because it targeted like gay men in the San Francisco area and burners, like Burning Man people. And it's not to say they had any ambition of stopping there. It's just that's where they started. There are very few examples of things like Instagram that like launched and then were like immediately like loved by all. So, especially since we have to scale both the workers and the work.
Yep.
It seems to me that what we want to try to do is keep the pump full on the work side, so we can only grow as fast as the work is coming in. And that I don't know whether that means starting with a certain vertical of work, so to speak, like Mechanical Turk data labeling stuff or programming or whatever. I'm pretty sure we can find awesome workers through our own workers' social networks to match whatever demand we have. So I feel like, you know, Anand went through this sort of we do everything to we do one thing transition. I would much rather that we rather than need to sort of try to be too broad and then narrow it back in, I would rather keep it like tight as we can at any given point, just sort of slowly push ourselves out as we have the strength to. I don't know whether that means a narrow set of users or if that means just keeping the market size small, like, you know, 10, 20 workers at first. We need to choose some way to grow.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's incompatible with having the vision. I think from beginning to end you can have the vision, and that's what guides your decisions.
How do we change the world then with that incremental process? What exactly are we changing?
So exponential curves are really hard to reason about.
Yeah.
Even an exponential thing starts really small,
yeah.
And like at the beginning it may not look like it's moving, it's like growing too fast, but it's actually growing exponentially so that it will start multiplying. I'm not saying that we move slowly. I'm saying that we start small. I think there's an important difference there.
Yeah.
I will reiterate. My concern is that, you know, we've had a very strong core of people throughout this process and from both cohorts. And we have a lot of work to do to get us to the place where we need to get this thing soft launched and recruit more. Hi, bud. Sorry, we have a wake up. But, you know, I think that, you know, I'm concerned about sort of like morale and endurance and some of the challenges that we have, and making sure that we tend to the people that we have within the research now so that we can get to that place.
Sure.
I think that there definitely are some needs that people have that I am compelled to address.
Do you feel like you can lead a charge to articulate those and like figure out how we should address it? Like, do you think you could like talk to people between now and Saturday, and then on Saturday's call just be like, here's what, you know, I've found, and here's what I think we need to do?
I mean, some of the obvious ones, like some of the tool-based issues, yeah. I mean, these are conversations we've been having with folks. You okay, buddy? You gonna go with Dad? I don't know where he's going. Sorry, you got a roaming 2-year-old. You know, I think there are some more sort of sensitive, quiet issues that I think are not appropriate to necessarily investigate publicly or discuss publicly.
Okay.
They're just private issues for people, so I'm a little bit hesitant on that front.
I see. So what do you suggest we do there? Is that something where like you and I need to have a conversation, or what?
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I can definitely put the word out that if anybody has, I mean, we haven't done a survey in a long time. I know Rajan was doing them for a while.
Yeah, we'll be doing one soon. We didn't want to overload people while we were in the push for the Chi deadline.
Totally makes sense. Completely agree. But I think that it might be a good time now to find a way, because different people have expressed different things over the last few months. And so if we can find a way to really encourage folks to be open and honest and really frank in that kind of a survey, I think it could really help us a lot.
Sure.
And in that regard, I'm totally happy to lead that charge.
Cool. And so I think the thing to do would be to contact Rajan and then work with him to generate survey questions. I think, you know, you probably have on the order of like 5 survey questions you can ask. Like, we can't create, if it becomes long, then no answers from people who we really need to hear from. But if
really just want to see what were the biggest challenges that you faced in the process.
Yep.
Kind of what I want to get to.
I mean, my suggestion, to be completely honest, would be
Yeah.
not to use the survey to generate that list, but instead to use the survey to, in some sense, rank that list.
So what?
To rank that list, I would be much more inclined to generate the list of problems. Yes, have some open-ended extra options, but I think we know what possible problems are. You talk about like falling out of sync if you leave for a while, making contributions, but then not being integrated, not knowing how to start, that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
I think I would much rather know what people think is the most important, second most important, third most important, et cetera, because I don't think we're going to be surprised by what we hear. So I'd much rather generate that list just by sort of doing one-on-one conversations and then trying to get a better sense of how important each of them are.
Okay, I get that. So talk to people and generate the list.
Yeah, and then talk to Rajan now so that you and he can plan a timeline for the survey.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah, and then also it sounds like there's some things that you think are relatively straightforward that we can do. Do it. Like just propose away.
Okay.
Maybe Saturday's meeting, at least until we potentially change time zones or whatever. At least this Saturday will be in the same slot. That's the right place to do that.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I want to look at how many people have filled that out. So.
Joram and Neil have been very quiet.
Do you want some popcorn?
Channeling their inner Jay Silver.
Popcorn.
You want to say hi? Say
hi. Durham?
Yes.
Neil? Thoughts? The silence scares me just a little bit.
Have you heard the song Sound of Silence?
Ironically, yes, we have heard it. Today, actually.
What's that, the deafening silence?
No, the Sound of Silence.
The Sound of Silence, yeah.
No, thank you.
Mommy.
Neil, anything? Durham?
Yeah, so regarding your previous statement, so what are you trying to accomplish? Like, just to figure out which problems you want to solve first, or if we know exactly like what the problem is, can't we just start doing something about it, or just say we cannot do anything about it, or whatever? I mean, why do we need the surveys and all that?
For me, it's more about it's twofold. One is to be really sure that the impressions that we have are shared among the crowd, because I think that's important. Excuse me. Can't kick this cough. To make sure that the things that I think are important, other people also feel are important. If you don't think we need to do that, then okay. I just feel like, in my experience and talking to people over the last few months, there's been a lot of folks who have felt like they've had concerns that have not been heard, and I just want to give them that opportunity. But if you guys feel differently, then whatever we think.
No, I think if we need to identify such things, then yeah, sure, we do it. But if we know that those things exist, then we should just, start doing something about it. So.
Perhaps what Allison is suggesting is that there is some value in being able to express the need separate from us solving it. Right, like us asking for feedback itself helps the person who can speak their mind.
Oh.
Some people feel comfortable DMing me and Rajan, others don't. What? Use words. I'm uncomfortable.
So here is my question about all this, right? What's the role of leadership board in this? All these
Well,
questions, I believe, should go to leadership board or whoever is the entity. Like, if I have problem with my government, I have power to like rule them out through the voting. So that the democratic mechanism gives me that ability to like go and express my views through voting mechanism, right? So from leadership board perspective, where do we? Let's say we take out leadership board tomorrow. Can we solve all this problem without leadership board?
Well, I
can,
mean,
right?
what we've done in the
So-
past is that the admin team, me, Rajan, Geza, Ranjay, and to a certain extent Adam, have been trying to do similar things. Which is not to say that the leadership board couldn't adopt that role, right? At some point, we might need to figure out like what is the leadership board of, like what's deciding what to do with crowd research and what's deciding what to do with Demo, the platform. But I'm certainly not against. If the leadership board does nothing, then the admin team will do something. But if we're a crowd-driven entity, I'm not against us as the leadership board figuring out better ways for us to run our own crowd.
But I think Neil raises a good point that if we're looking at scope and we're going to look at the functionality of the leadership board, should we start defining what direction we should we be going in? With Rajan finishing up his project, some of the meta things, the onboard, some of the operational things that Al was talking about, should that fall under our purview? Should we start leading a little bit more, start setting tone and direction? Who's going to manage the money? Who's going to be the fiduciary partner in this exercise, et cetera, et cetera. So I think to Neil's point, I think defining who and what we do a little bit is probably a good exercise for us. And whether we do it by ourselves or engage the crowd, I think either way, but defining our scope very specifically, I can get down with that. I think it'll help our effort and investment of time and energy in the project. I'm going to take it off first.
Okay.
Just let them know. I'm dropping off.
All right. Trigva has to put the young one back to bed.
Okay. Bye.
All right. I'll see you later, buddy.
He's a good singer. So I want to try to recall what the open questions of scope and boundary were previously. I think, if I'm trying to remember, one thing we were discussing was whether or not the leadership board, what its relationship should be with, in particular, the sort of platform designers. So what we currently, I think the most recent decision was to essentially elect a leadership board that had a sort of significant stake with the platform, the people who are building it, right? Is that basically it? Are we done? And then we give the leadership board the ability to essentially dictate, design requirements to the platform team, like the researchers, so to speak? Or is there anything that the leadership board can't do?
I don't know. I mean, there's the long-term answer, and then there's the gut answer. I mean, the gut answer right now is that a lot of what we have works as it is, and I don't think we necessarily need to be dictating development. That just doesn't strike me as something that we need to do. I mean,
Well,
I see.
Okay,
I see
so,
the
so that
board.
suggests that like the leadership board is doing operation but not design and development. Is that what you're saying?
Like I said, it's not a good, like, consistent answer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
we have to think about it more.
okay.
I feel like right now we don't. One of the things I would see long term, the leadership board being involved in there, is if the various involved parties had conflicting needs or requests about the platform itself. But since we're all one party, I just don't see that being an issue right now.
I'm sure. So what you're saying is pragmatically from your perspective, like, don't worry about it, excuse me, and just leave it vague, and we do what we do.
But that's not going to go over well. That doesn't sound good.
Well, so
I mean, we know our intentions are good, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, so here's why I'm bringing it up. You know, if we're going to start soft launching and recruiting workers and requesters, like part of the pitch to them as like changing the world or whatever is that they have a stake in how this goes, right? They, workers, you can help to decide the future of this platform. And if we say something like, and I think it would be legitimate that if we were like, do you have a say about this little tiny part of the world, but otherwise it's all us. Like that feels like it would be a bit of pulling the rug out. Same thing with requesters, but I think workers are the ones who probably would care more. So the question is how, as we had before, how do we balance sort of I don't mean, so I'm going to say progress versus debate. So like, it's easy to make decisions if you don't have to get a majority, right? But if you don't get a majority, then you're really disenfranchising the people who you wanted to enfranchise here. Yeah. So you could imagine other sort of middle ground solutions, like I don't know, the leader, much like we've been using the announcements channel, the platform developers sort of push any major decisions, and if the leadership board wants to take them up and potentially veto them or something, they can. Or you could design it the other way so that the leadership board has the power to sort of affect change. The platform developers can veto if they think that it's like bad for the future of the platform, but the leadership board can, through like 2/3 or whatever, override the veto. Like, I think you want something like this that makes. Yeah. If you really want people to feel like they're represented, they really do have to have control over the platform. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we have to come down philosophically on one side or the other. At the end of the day, do they have the power to make the final decision through this leadership board, or no?
Well, I mean, the leadership board also is elected by the participants, right? So it's not like it's just the 7 of us for all eternity sitting in a room somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's why I think we need to design this, is that in a month, say, we might have real workers on the platform who have real concerns. Yeah. Aside from our user interface.
Yeah. We're getting there.
No, it's actually it's in pretty good shape, all things considered. I've done user studies where people can't complete the study. We did not have that problem.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Anyone?
I can't tell if you unmuted because you wanted to say something, or
if... He's just teasing us.
Yeah, no. For me, it's like I still... So the way I kind of structure, let's say in governance or anything, is what you do, you subtract that entity and take it out, put it standalone, and then look at the platform as a whole. And then ask a question, okay, if this entity doesn't exist, how platform looks different? From every perspective, like from engineering perspective, from policy perspective, governance perspective, and so on. And then you ask, like, adding that to the platform, what critical problems it solves. And one thing I believe this leadership board structure or governance structure is going to help address the problems where there are like more operational issues between workers and requesters, where it's kind of going to end up like a court system, right? Where people have problems, but they just don't know where to go and who will hear them. So this leadership board kind of will act as a entity where whatever the requesters or whether it's the platform designers all can go and talk to those people, and they will kind of give some sort of assurance or some sort of promise that we are listening to you and we will address those issues. At this stage in our platform, or even like, let's say we got real workers and real requesters, it's very hard for me becoming like in next 4 or 5 months those kind of issues will arise or not arise, right? So my again original thinking is, what's the role that this leadership board gonna play in our structure? And I think we should probably either, okay, let's discuss that as a community of 400, 500 people, or do some brainstorming around it, like whether it's this board has some power, no power, and how they execute it, like what's the process. Like simple example, right? You have a problem with the system, you raise a ticket, your ticket gets addressed, it gets prioritized, and somebody comes and addresses it, right? A simple workflow. Do you have that workflow in terms of leadership board? Right now we don't, right? So we should kind of like think about that structure. Like, okay, let's say we have, let's create an artificial problem, right? Amazon Mechanical Turk has raised fees by 5%. And let's imagine like we have real workers, real requesters. Now, what are the steps the leadership board gonna take in this situation? And how we're gonna solve that problem? So those are like real issues where I think eventually we will head towards. And at that time, it's gonna be very important, because most of the boards becomes useless when people see there is no value of them. So they just become like, what do we call, a showpiece. Like there are committees and they look great in the environment, but like as soon as people realize, okay, well, this is just a standalone committee, nobody cares about their opinion, or nobody sees actions they take are influencing the society, then it just remains the board, right? There is no leadership in that. So if we are going back to our open governance research question, I would say, like, personally, that's a good start to think about, like, okay, why do we exist as a leadership board, what role we play, and how it is different. If you write a paper about it, or if you like go and do marketing or whatever, whether it's research or enterprise or a startup or anything else, if something exists, it has to have some kind of justification for the reason, like why it exists, right? Like Google exists because they want to democratize access to information, right? Target exists because they want to democratize the design, right? So we exist because we want to democratize the workplace, but at the same time, how do we do it with this structure? So we have to think along that direction, which is like much more philosophical rather than anything else.
That was me snapping in agreement. Yeah, I mean, when we originally started talking about the leadership board, I don't know whether it was for research or for sort of policy reasons, but like my initial thing was like, the leadership board seems like it would be well equipped to answer questions of policy, like should there be a minimum wage? What should the sort of overhead be? what should the arbitration process be? All this kind of stuff. Seems like things that, to me, like a coalition of workers and requesters would be really well equipped to do. Things like the stuff that we've been deciding and like how to grow the platform and all that kind of stuff somehow seems to me, at least seemed to me at the time, and I can be changed. My mind can be changed, but still seems to me like things that like the platform team would at least get a first crack at. But I don't know how to operationalize. Like it's fuzzy. It's there in my head, but I'd have to think about how to operationalize that distinction. Because I would love for the leadership board to start, figuring out some of those questions.
Or we keep them separate, which is also okay, I think.
So you just say leadership board can do X but not Y.
Yeah.
You're saying like that.
I mean, so far leadership board doesn't really sound like a leadership board. It sounds more like
Board.
Sounds like
a board.
Yeah, that's my point. Like,
Go to, but they don't actually make decisions. They kind of answer questions and try to resolve conflicts.
I can see that.
Going back to Neil's example, I mean,
I'm sorry.
about what was it? Raising fees. So who generates that problem in the first place? I mean, is leadership just trying to solve the problems that we generate ourselves, or trying to address workers and requesters' complaints, or
So
what are we doing there?
both of the structures important, right? So if let's say there are problems within system, we need to address them, right? And there are external workers or requesters, they have issues we need to address. Now, question is, does leadership board has power? Like if you take like these two sets and then think about it, like where does the leadership board lie, or does it lie in both of the sets? Like does it have authority to address both of the issues? If it does, then do we need to include more people in their decision making? Or if we say, okay, we want to keep them separate, then it's completely different ballgame. Then we say, okay, we limit the power of leadership board, and these are the intersections where it can operate, and these are the demographics where it has no say. And
Can
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
make a suggestion?
Mhm.
Let's go step by step. Why don't we make a vote if there's power or no power, and then from there we talk about the other decisions that we need to make.
Yeah,
I was gonna suggest maybe some steps that can get us there, because I don't know what power or no power means yet. What if we just even did something like make a Google Doc where we just list out, like, what I want to do is do something inductive where we just list out, here are things that, like, decisions that would need to get made somehow. Change in the minimum wage. Should we like remove the boomerang reputation system and replace it with some other reputation system? Should we restructure the leadership board? Should we change the name? Should we launch? Should we fire a worker? Like all these, like we just generate a list of these, and then we can maybe like, I think we may be more aligned than we suspect, and I think if we take all of these point examples, we can start to see, like, oh yeah, we seem to think that on these things the leadership board should have power, on these things we all seem to agree that they shouldn't, and then we can take that to come up inductively with essentially a criteria.
Yeah, before doing that, I think I would go back to what Neil suggested earlier. So think of those questions that we cannot answer, so our team cannot answer, so we need leadership board for that. So not any question, maybe we can actually answer that ourselves. So when do we launch, or do we launch? I mean, that totally depends on whether we are ready or whether we have developed our platform so far. So that's not really a question for them. So we have to decide what questions are there that we cannot answer, but we need like this special team to, evaluate it.
So I'm just gonna put together here. If I put a link, LB possible questions save. I'm going to make it public. Anyone with the link can edit, save. Copy link. All right, I'm going to post this in the leadership board channel. So my suggestion on a time check is that we finish in the next 5 minutes, just because I feel like I've noticed that when stuff gets over an hour, we start to peter out. But maybe we can spend the next 5 minutes sort of generating a short list of possible things that are, as Durham was saying, like sort of in our power or not in our power to do. We launch next week. That's a question that the leadership board of requesters and workers and a few platform people could decide. Should they be able to decide that or not? And maybe let's just focus on generating like 10 of these things. And the next time we meet, or between now and then, we can start to say, okay, so, yep, Durham thinks that they should be able to do that, but not that, and I think we're going to see some lines that'll be obvious, and that's going to help a lot.
Hey, Michael, can I ask kind of a general question on this? I mean, long term, what do you see as the future between the research cohort and the platform? Because some of these decisions that we're making, it's because we have research issues pre-launch that we won't have later, but will there always be a research cohort, or does it at some point just become an entity?
My biggest dream, I'm sorry, not my biggest dream, one of my dreams would be that if this succeeds, it does maintain research in its DNA. That doesn't mean that the operational day-to-day stuff doesn't happen. Maybe it's an entity that handles most of the stuff, but I want it to have a space for research in the same way that it enabled us to think through these issues. I want to enable other people to do it as well.
Mm-hmm. So should we keep that in mind as we determine these parameters?
Yeah, I mean,
like Durham was saying, like right now, whether we're ready or not is kind of determined by whether we're actually ready or not. But in the future, that might be different because not everything is within the research cohort.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking about it, I would roughly think of the research cohort and the platform team to be essentially unified. It doesn't mean that they're the same thing, just that in some sense they're on the same side of a wall. So that there's like workers and requesters on the system, and then there are the people who are trying to create and improve the system. That's in some sense where I see the line between the leadership board and platform team or whatever.
So in that case, the leadership board is the communion of the two, but the leadership board wouldn't necessarily have any say or interaction over the research aspect.
That's what we have to decide, right? I mean, so when I say sort of platform team, I mean design, development, and research sort of all rolled up. I think there are separate questions where we'll need to decide: can development and design override a research prerogative, or the other way? Yes, I think those are all, we're going to have to figure that out. But I think, at least in the short and medium term, we're likely to be this really cool hybrid of both of those two. And so I don't think we have to make a decision yet on those.
I don't think we have a problem there yet. So.
Was that the question?
I'm asking because if we're setting parameters and policy, we just have to know what that future looks like, so we answer for that future, not just for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to think about it would be when we talk about platform, we're sort of holistically think of us, the people who are, we are a combo of research, design, development, usability. Like, we are the people who are creating the platform. And yes, at some point there will be people who may not care about research but care about the product a lot. I think you want to have space for that, but I think that I really, if and when we grow, and I really hope we do, I want it to be interwoven. I want it to be sort of in our DNA that we are trying to act in the world's best interest, to be researchers and developers and designers all in. I think that there's a benefit there.
Yeah, agreed.
So, okay. So let's get a couple things on this doc, and then we can return to it whenever our next leadership board meeting is. So let's just get down the ones we've talked about so far. So there's like, do we raise the what do they call it? Not the, it's like the overhead rate, the platform fee. Does this worker deserve to get paid even though the requester says it's bad work? We talked about what's the minimum wage? Yeah. Should we get rid of Boomerang? Should we rename Demo to, what was another one of ours?
Opus Kaizen.
Opus Kaizen. Yeah. Jade Silver's like, still gonna happen, guys.
That's awesome.
What are some other? I'm just trying to generate a few real quickly.
Can workers be anonymous?
Good. Should we change the color scheme? Should we redesign the task authorship page? Should to highlight X? Should workers be able to? Should requesters have to pay workers for prototype tasks no matter what the quality is, or something like this, like it's about payment?
Should the question be asked like this, or is it better like to ask, is there a reason why we shouldn't do this, or why we shouldn't do that?
Could you give an example?
So for example, platform asks a question to leadership board, is there a reason why we wouldn't launch next week? Rather than asking them, do we launch or not?
Right. So I see what you're saying. Here's how I would frame this for the moment. I think what I want to know is who's the principal actor for each of these. So in what you just said, Durham, the principal actor is platform, but gets sort of a check by the leadership board, right? And so when you read this question, like, do we launch next week? I think the question is who is empowered to make that decision? If we say leadership board, then the leadership board makes the decision and maybe checks with platform, or if it's the platform, then the platform makes the decision and possibly checks with the leadership board or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's
but
what
some of them, for example, should we rename demo? Is there? I mean, maybe the question is like.
It's more like this. We should rename Demo to Opus Kaizen. Who should be able to say that?
Okay.
Maybe we should just change them into like imperatives. We are launching next week. Let's change the platform fee to to 20%. Worker X deserves to get paid even though the requester says it's bad work. The minimum wage is set to the country's minimum wage. Get rid of Boomerang and replace it with a 5-star system. Workers cannot be anonymous. They must provide an SSN or something like that. Let's change the color scheme to red and purple. We need to redesign to add a video container. Requesters must pay workers for prototypes, no matter what they call it. Okay, so those are statements that someone needs to be empowered to make. Someone needs to be able to make those policy decisions. Okay, so here's my proposal. and to everyone on the call, I'm interested in your opinion here. My proposal is that we take some time and then do something like, like let's say we're launching next week. Let's say I believe that platform should be the one to be able to decide that. I just put my name and then platform. It's just us brainstorming, and then maybe I think that the leadership board can decide that. But maybe Durham believes that it should be the platform or something like that. I feel like that's, for me, this is the next step. I just want to see where we all stand on these things if we start to sort of just check our gut. How's that sound? Sir Trygve, is he back?
He's not.
Okay. Is there anything else on the agenda that we want to make sure we talk about? Is this the kind of leadership board meeting that you and he wanted to have?
You know what? Well, why don't you give me 1 second? I'll go get him.
Hi there, folks. I'm back.
Hi. So the question on tap was whether this was the kind of leadership board meeting you wanted to have. Did we cover the kinds of things you wanted to talk about?
When I had left, yeah, I think things were trending that we were starting to uncover some of the operational, some of the directional questions. I don't know where they wound up. I don't know if we moved the needle significantly. So the tone and the temperament was going the way that I kind of envisioned. I think now the finals, or kind of the post-mortem, is do other people feel satisfied? Are other people all on the same page? Are we of a common ground and a common mind here? Carolina, are we kind of good? Because what are the end? What are the marching orders, or where did you guys end up at after I left?
Here's my understanding of it. Allison, in terms of crowd research as a process, Allison will come up with recommendations and then work with Rajan to put out a survey to further examine what we should do. And then in terms of identifying what the powers of the leadership board are supposed to be, there's a Google Doc that I posted in the channel where we're writing out particular decisions that might get made, and then putting as bullets on those our own intuitions as to who should have the ability to make that decision. Just so we can sort of check our assumptions to see if once we sort of figure out roughly with these point examples, I think it's far easier to start to come up with the principle that becomes the guiding sort of constitution of what the leadership board can do.
Okay. Is the end game here to ultimately convert the leadership board into kind of the management of Demo?
I think that's what we're deciding by figuring out where we believe the leadership board should be making decisions and where we believe sort of quote platform, which is the designers, developers, and researchers who are creating it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to become clear whether the leadership board is management or if it's a different form of representation.
Okay. All right.
Or some weird hybrid.
Okay. And we have a general consensus that was, I assume then we have consensus, is that's the direction to go? Neil, Carolina, Durham?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And we can bring this up on Saturday as well.
Okay.
So
as far as timeline then, should we, do you want to circle back then and meet up early next week. Should we create some sort of a meeting tempo of every week, every 10 days, until we start getting solid on things, or should we just kind of respond to the feedback from the Google Doc?
Tempo seems useful, at least for now.
Okay.
You know, we could do Wednesday nights for the next couple weeks and then see how it goes or something like that.
Okay. Cool. Alrighty then. Well, then we'll keep this time then for next Wednesday as well, unless folks have some other recommendations or other times. But
Right.
then we'll leave it at that. So we got a Google Doc where we're going to collect some ideas. Al is going to start looking at some operational things, and then that's it. I know there was some talk about surveying and stuff. Is that that falls under Al's mandate?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other points then?
No.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Leadership Board 1 is done.
To the future.
So we'll chat with you all on Saturday or between now and then.
Okay, sounds great.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
See ya.
Ciao.